Okay, so next, in our next talk, we have Dr. Jennifer Keenan from Civil Engineering. And Jennifer has the wonderfully titled talk, Flipping Zoom, Activities to Engage Students Online in a Flipped Classroom Context. And Jennifer is going to share with us some of the approaches she's taken to engaging students online this year.
Okay, thanks very much, Neil. So I'll get started just by way of brief introduction. I am module coordinator and lecturer on 3 modules, one to first year, one to second year, and one to third year. And in these modules, I have mixed groups of engineering students and architecture students. And that is it's a theme throughout all of my teaching. So when I talk about the flipped classroom, I'm really talking about moving away from the idea of the traditional classroom, where I might stand up at the top of the classroom at the blackboard, or indeed dictate online. With students listening for an hour at a time, and instead moving towards this idea of giving students some material before the class, engaging them in activities during the time with me, and then following up with some work after the class. And throughout my slides today, you'll see these 3 icons: that piece that comes before the classroom, that piece that we do during class, and then the piece that comes afterwards. So I'm just going to mention a couple of the activities today. Some stuff that I do with group work, a little bit using Padlet, some role play activities, some things I do with rubrics, peer review, and if I have time, I'll get on to the bit about guests and model making. A key function that I've used throughout is this idea of checklists on Brightspace. I have found these extremely useful for the before piece. And I start off typically with somewhat simple checklists for weeks 1 and 2. And I found then as the weeks went on, students were really benefiting from more detailed checklists all the way through to the end of the trimester. And what's particularly nice about the Brightspace checklist feature is this ability to use bold and to embed links. So I found that great for curating and for scaffolding students with what it was I was looking for them to do. So firstly then, for group work and online, so before the class, I ask students to read a short essay on hitchhikers. You know, these students who try and get away without doing much of the group work. And this is all facilitated online in Brightspace before the class. I also assign students to a group and a discussion forum for that group. And I ask them to write a post including their name, where they're from, what they studied in school, and so on. So then when students come to the classroom, I put them into breakout rooms. And I ask them to do an icebreaker activity, which in essence is verbalizing what they put into their discussion forum. They introduce themselves, they talk a little bit about what engineering is and what architecture is, and so on. And then as a second activity in breakout rooms, I ask them to develop a team contract. So this is kind of an agreement or kind of a quasi-legal document that students author themselves and sign and agree to honour, so that nobody can make invalid claims later about knowing what they were supposed to do. So I have found this extremely effective, and students' feedback has been very positive. The second activity that I wanted to talk about is this use of the timeline in Padlet. So before the class, I ask students to read a set of notes on the evolution of structure and form. So this is a topic that's quite relevant to my engineering and architecture students. So I use the checklist on Brightspace and I upload the notes ahead of time. And then during class, I'm hoping this video is going to play. This is what I saw. So I had put students into breakout rooms. I had given them a Padlet each, and I'm asking them to put the buildings in order on the timeline that they believe they should be throughout the ages. And this was really fascinating to watch on my side, and it certainly seemed to support student learning. And then afterwards, I put up an image of what the correct solution looked like. So in this case, the beehive hut was the earliest example, and later on then was to be the White House and Crystal Palace and so on. Another activity then that I have used that's been quite successful is role play. So this allows students to explore realistic situations that they will encounter in their future careers. So beforehand, I uploaded a set of notes to Brightspace, which gave details on the types of roles that happen on construction projects, a little bit about that shared habitus and the stereotypes that occur, and the importance of communication and teamwork. So this is all provided to students ahead of time. During class then, I invite students to read a role play description for a particular building project. And I have one description for the architecture students and a different one for the engineering students. I pop them into breakout rooms and they explore this scenario. And then I repeat the activity, but the second time round, the roles are reversed. So I'm asking the engineering students to take on the role of the architect and vice versa. And the feedback from students really has been fantastic. Afterwards, I asked them to share with me on a Jamboard some ideas they have, some thoughts they have on the role of the engineer, the role of the architect, what they're good at, where their strengths lie, and so on. So that was really nice engagement from large groups. Another thing that I've done with students has been to develop the rubric with them in class, and I do this for all of the assessments in all of my modules. This is an example of a rubric I use in first year. So before the class, I will have given students the brief for the assignment and the descriptions of the criteria that I'm suggesting we'll use. And then I ask them to think about whether they would like to weight any particular criteria more heavily than another, or maybe whether they will be equally weighted. And then when students come to class, I pop them into breakout rooms and ask them to discuss in their groups what weighting they would like each criteria to have in the assignment. And I'm hoping now that this video is going to play as well. So this is me taking a recording of my screen. It's a Google Sheet where students are live in the classroom populating the table with the weightings that they would like each criteria to have. And in discussion then in class, we decide which criteria will have which weighting. And this, I have found, gives students buy-in to the assessment. They really understand the criteria being used, and it gets them started earlier on their assignments. So I found that really effective. Afterwards then, I go back into Brightspace where I have pre-populated the rubric, and I edit the weightings to be assigned to each criteria based on what students have told me that they would like. And I do this for all of my assignments. So these are some of the rubrics that I use in later modules. And as you can see, they're a little bit more advanced and more complex. A further activity that I have used then is to use a peer review of previous student project work. And I've done this using Peer Scholar, which is a tool currently being piloted across the campus. So during the class, I guide students to where they can access the tool in Brightspace. And I have pre-populated it with examples of work from previous years. And I ask students, for example, to list some good aspects or the best aspects of a particular project, those areas for improvement. And then there's the opportunity to include the rubric that we have just created here at the bottom. And students found this really beneficial. The feedback was very positive in helping them understand and prepare for the assignments they would complete for me. I brought some guest experts in to review and give tutorials to my students in another interactive activity. And before coming to the class to meet with these guest experts, I asked students to prepare drafts of their projects, of their construction designs, and also to prepare some questions for the experts. And then during the class, again, it was facilitated on Zoom through breakout rooms. I had 12 professional practicing expert architects and engineers. And I set up consultations between the groups of students and these experts in a rotating manner. And this was fantastic. The feedback from experts was that they really enjoyed the experience. They felt the students were really engaged and they were delighted to participate. And it has been one of the most positive things from students. Rather than listening to me tell them what's good and what's not so good about their designs, to get feedback from professional experts was really fantastic. And so that was the activity during class. And then afterwards, I asked students to prepare notes based on the feedback they'd received and how they would incorporate that feedback into a later part or a revised version of their design. And that led straight away then into a model making activity where I asked students to design and develop scaled models of their building designs. And before this activity, I asked students to watch tutorials on YouTube about how to draw their design in 2D. I advise them that they'll be given a certain amount of material, in this case 2 sheets of birch ply of a certain thickness, and that they must draw out in 2D those pieces they will need to cut in the lab to then construct their model. And then when students came in, and we managed this quite successfully last week in spite of COVID, students came in to a much more socially distanced setup than is seen here in this image, but they came into the Memorial Hall over in Richview and assembled their models. And students really, they told me they learned an awful lot from this process about how they can have their designs on paper, but it's not until they go to construct them they really see the learning. The final activity that I'm going to mention is a table quiz. So this was something I did with my first years. It was a little bit complex to set up, but I got there in the end. In essence, I live streamed myself from YouTube as quizmaster. Simultaneously, I had Zoom operating with students in breakout rooms. I used Google Forms as a mechanism for students to write their answers, their group number and their answers for each round. And then I was able to use this image, which was pre-populated from the Google form, as the scoreboard. So students could see where they were on the scoreboard in live mode. And the feedback was positive. They enjoyed it. It was engaging and it got them doing something a little bit different. The very last thing that I'm going to mention then is that to engage students online in the online context, I often encouraged them and invited them to post something online, to tweet or to post on LinkedIn, something they liked about the class. and they were invited to tag me and to tag or hashtag any of the following things. And I had some really nice engagement from that. I could see what students were liking and so on. And so I guess, given that this is about Flippin Zoom and engagement, anyone here today is welcome to tweet anything they liked that I spoke about. And I'm just going to mention here that I've a short number of publications and videos on my YouTube channel with a little more detail on all of the things that I've just chatted about, and you're invited to check that out if you so wish. So I think I'm just 1 minute shy of my 15-minute slot, so I'll pause while I'm ahead, and thank you very much for joining.